This is Akashvani. In the weekly program Current Affairs, now we bring you a discussion on boosting renewable energy adoption towards India's sustainable development. The participants are Anil Rajdhan, energy expert, and Mukul Sanwal, environmentalist, and Omvesh Upadhyay, anchor.
In recent years, the Government of India has taken several steps to promote and accelerate renewable energy capacity in the country, with the target to achieve 500 gigawatt of installed electric capacity from non-fossil resources by 2030. Yesterday, the Union Minister for New and Renewable Energy and Power informed that the installed renewable energy capacity has increased from 76.37 gigawatt in 2014 to 178.98 gigawatt this year, which is an increase of around 2 times. And today, to discuss on India's effort and commitment to boost renewable energy adoption, we are joined by two eminent experts, former Power Secretary Anil Rajdhan and environmentalist Mukul Sanwal. Welcome to the program. So, to begin the discussion, my question is to Anil Rajdhan sir. Anil ji, how has India's renewable energy capacity evolved over the past decade, and what key factors have contributed to this growth? How do you see India's growth story in energy sector?
You see, earlier decades, our renewable energy was largely hydro, and we had begun about 2 decades back to really work seriously on solar and wind power. But the progress was not as fast as we had expected it to be, because when global warming concerns came into existence and we realized that we need to change the way we produce energy and consume energy, we began to concentrate on renewables. At that point of time, we knew that we had a vast potential of solar energy, but at the same time, India is a land-constrained country, and we did have a wind potential, also mostly along the coastal regions, and the hydro potential was by and large right along the Himalayas. There was a very minimal amount of pumped storage, which was used to balance power, excess power, but our mainstay over the last few decades had been coal-based power. Nuclear was a very small component, though countries like China are concentrating on nuclear for baseload power, because renewable power is by and large variable power. It depends on when the sun shines, it depends on when the wind blows, and whether the water flows are as regular as we want them to be. And of course, in the hill areas, we have forests which should not be cut down beyond a point, in fact, avoided if possible. So willy-nilly, we have been depending on coal-based power, and despite the best intentions of the government, we've had to increase our coal-based power because we are a galloping economy now. And you need constant power. The growth of power has been very, very significant. For example, you see the installed capacity at the end of September 2023 in gigawatt terms, coal and lignite was about 50% of our capacity, whereas the gross generation in 22-23 from coal-based was about 70.6%, meaning thereby that 50% capacity is producing about 70% of energy. And solar, which was about 17% of the installed capacity, was giving you, in terms of energy production, much lesser, only about 6.3%, and wind was 4.4%, and other renewable sources about 2%. Now, this broadly being the picture, the government of India had put some renewable purchase obligations in the past, that you have to purchase so much renewable power, but these renewable purchase obligations were left to the state electricity regulatory commissions, because power or electricity in India is a concurrent subject. And all the state regulatory commissions were not exactly on board to ensure that that much renewable power was purchased. And secondly, let's face it, that much renewable power was not even available. In very recent times, what the government has done is that they have notified quite recently this renewable purchase obligation through the Electricity Conservation Act, which is a central act. And they're putting it directly now virtually on the consumers an obligation, that is industry and others, to purchase this renewable power. And hopefully, let us see if we are able to keep our availability of renewable power in tandem with what the law is asking them to buy. Hopefully, we should be getting nearer our target.
Absolutely, sir. And you provided a very wide overview about this. I want to bring Mr. Mukul Sawal in the conversation. Mukulji, how do you see India's effort in this, and how India is boosting the renewable capacity for sustainable development in future? What's your view?
The key issue is manufacturing capacity in the country, which is now being set up and which should become, more of it should become operational soon. And as it expands, as our know-how, capacity, technology adoption expands, this can accelerate very rapidly. So initially there are problems, but once you have the arrangements in place, because it is not just about manufacturing a module or setting up a renewable energy plant, you have to have the grid, you have to balance the grid, you have to carry the power somewhere else, there has to be a demand, and you have to create a market to ensure that this power is bought or evacuated before you buy maybe coal or something else, depending on location of the coal plant, which may be somewhat cheaper. So all that arrangement is now coming into place and it should accelerate. I think another important issue has been that our demand is going to increase very rapidly. We are looking into the fuel mix at the moment, but we are not looking at the demand mix. As urbanization increases, as more people get into the urban middle class, each family, each household is likely to have an air conditioning unit. Just as the refrigerators, gas connection, other implements like even washing machine have become very, very common across the board. Similarly, air conditioning is going to become common and is going to boost the demand, including in rural areas. And as urbanization increases, more people move into the city, more than one air conditioning unit will be needed for an household. At the same time, we are going in for electric vehicles in a very big way. We want that very soon, around 2030, that all new vehicles will be electric vehicles. And that manufacturing is being pushed through. That is, local companies are doing well. We are insisting that others who come in produce or manufacture their vehicles in India to increase the employment and for the technology to spread, and so that we get the benefit. And that is also moving in a very vast pace. The third thing is that we are a very big country. Coal supplies are located in certain areas, and to transport coal to the other end of the country doubles the price of coal. For example, if coal is costing 2,000 rupees a ton at the pit head, by the time it gets into Punjab, it may be even 4,000. So Government of India is saying, like, we'll have pit head electricity generation, and the barren areas that are in other parts, we will have solar, wind, and on the coastal areas, which are also far away from coal-producing areas, we could have nuclear. So what is happening is that as we are getting to be a 4-5 trillion economy and aiming to be 10 plus trillion economy, we are realizing that we will need a huge amount of energy where we don't need to look at the fuel mix, how much coal we are using or how much oil and solar, but what is likely to be the demand of that middle class or that level of income, that level of manufacturing, that level of transportation. Lastly, we import oil and gas. Almost all of 80% of our oil and gas is imported, and that is a fluctuating market. It is an uncertain market, and we are dependent on somebody else. Now, we have very rightly seem to be taking or almost have taken that policy decision that instead of removing coal from our fuel mix, why don't we try to remove oil from the fuel mix? As far as climate change is concerned, it has almost the same impact, almost. The calorific value, the emissions per unit of energy are more in coal, but then they're also substantial in oil. Today, worldwide average 30% of carbon emissions come from transportation. If we can reduce our dependence on oil, if we can switch to electric vehicles, we will need to get into coal. As Mr. Razan has just pointed out, we cannot do without coal as base load for a long time to come, till our nuclear capacity increases. So basically, what is happening is that when we have moving from a lower level of economic growth to a higher level of economic growth and aiming to be a developed country, and part of being a developed country is the use of energy, because energy is directly related to well-being.
Yes, sir. And to balance the demand and supply ratio, we have seen that recently Government of India had increased the effort in specific policies and initiatives to promote more renewable energy adoption through schemes like Pradhan Mantri Kisan Urja Suraksha Evam Utthan Mahabhiyan, that is also known as PM Kusum, per se schemes like Solar Rooftop Phase 2, 1200,000 megawatt CPSU scheme Phase 2. So I want to ask this to Anilji. Anilji, how do you see specific schemes like these and how collectively they are helping in achieving the overall goal of renewable energy adoption?
It is the way forward. You need decentralized generation of renewable energy. And as Mughalji has pointed out, we are getting heavily urbanized. And with that urbanization, there is multi-storied housing and building, which needs more air conditioning. In fact, our energy or electricity consumption profile shows that while the day peak can be met with our renewable sources, the evening or the night peak, we are unable to meet through these sources. And there we have to depend on coal, etc. When everybody gets home, you switch on your ACs, you need lifts, you need power for pumping water to those multi-storied units. Now, I feel that we need a more holistic approach, embracing our architectural laws and regulations, where in times to come, when the increasing glass fascia now on buildings and facades, we need to embed these solar power generating cells in these, create more storage, because renewable power's real cost is production plus storage. So if you can even encourage some domestic storage or people trading in small packets of power, that may be the way to the future. But this runs into a bit of a bottleneck, again, because power is a concurrent subject in our constitution. And for transporting renewable power within a state or outside that state, some of the state transmission regulations and distribution regulations come into place. We will need open access of very small packets of energy, or much smaller packets of energy, across states, across the profiles or the jurisdictions of distribution companies. It's going to be a whole new paradigm. And the real cost of renewable power, in my view, it's production and its storage.
Absolutely.
Which we have now started moving in that direction. And that is the way we should move forward. It will take a little time to evolve. We are in an adolescent stage of economic growth, and it is possibly a time for India to grab this opportunity, industry houses to grab this opportunity, but that will only happen if our expenditure on research, development, and deployment increases to at least twice what it has been. I've been saying on various fora that when we attained independence, our expenditure on, our economic status and also expenditure on research and development was not too far away from countries like Israel or Japan or Korea, etc. But they've left us far behind because our research was only by and large confined, genuine research, to large government-owned establishments like atomic energy, space, some other programs. Industry needs to imbibe this fully and I think take it forward, and we must, I think in due course of time, compel industry to have a certain minimum expenditure on research, development. When our own minds and technologists go to the US and capture those institutions, why can't we stop this brain drain by setting up those facilities and those demand centers in this country itself?
Indeed, and Anil sir, you very rightly said about decentralization of production and also open access. This is what PM Kusum scheme is trying to achieve. When we are talking about PM Kusum scheme, which is the initiative to provide clean energy to more than 35 lakh farmers by solarizing their agriculture pumps. So in that way, it also allows them an additional income where they can sell the power to the grid through solar power projects and also install smaller plants in their barren lands. So I want to take this question to Mukul sir. Sir, when we look at schemes like PM Kusum, and recently this year the government also waived interstate transmission charges for renewable energy generating stations and pumped hydroelectric stations. How do you see decisions like this? Because this will not only promote interstate energy transmission, but it will also provide open access to consumers. How do you see that?
This is what you have indicated is part of a package. The most important issue here is the role of the state in giving a clear direction and a long-term direction, because these are capital-intensive projects. If the private sector is going to make huge investments in any of these areas, they need to be assured that there will be no policy change which will harm their investment or go against their investment. Now here, at the last meeting of this International Solar Alliance, Mr. R.K. Singh, the Minister for Energy, made a clear statement. He said, look, we are not phasing out coal. We need the coal for base load. And in the climate change conference that is going on at this point of time, the Prime Ministers and the Minister for Environment have made it very clear we will continue to depend on coal because there is no option for us. Yes, we will try to do our best to keep it limited, but we will not compromise on our growth, on our well-being of our people. Now, decentralized power fits into this because in the rural areas, we have seen that there is a lot of line losses have been in the past. Farmers don't have high demand at this moment. They need power to run a pump and something at home. Now that is ideally suited for solar panel. They don't need to get up at night when power was being given to them because we are not able to provide 24/7 power at this point of time. Again, as Mr. Radhan pointed out, in the evening there is a very high demand and the farmer has to go into this field late at night with dealing with snakes and other issues. And it is not the right thing to do in an expanding economy where we are looking at the well-being of all our people, whether urban or rural. So this is part of a package. The government is saying, look, wherever you have an issue with respect to the flow of power, and you can increase renewable energy, you can give incentives, or there is a demand which can be met by renewable energy, let us have a scheme and let us push it to the extent possible. And this is where we have found that India is breaking new pathways, not depending on ideas from the West. So far, rooftop solar was something that emerged in a very big way in Germany and other places in the West. It's not very suitable for us. For us, the farmer in their countries, 80% of population has moved to cities. We are just around 50 at the moment, and population is 5 times theirs. So the policies that we need will be very different, and we can see those policies are coming about gradually. You are looking at transmission. If there is a bottleneck in transmission, government is making a policy or a scheme to take care of that. Mr. Radhan just told us that there is a question of balancing. There is a question of asking industry to give them quotas rather than give quotas to electricity boards. So using then a Conservation Act rather than getting into the federal issue. So the government of India is determined, and the signal they are giving to the private sector and now to society also that, look, this is the way to go. As far as we can, we will go, but without compromising well-being. So one can expect more schemes of this kind to come about as problems arise to deal with them. And we look at the sum total of all this, right from import to reaching the consumer. We can see that it is government policy that is driving this in a very big way in partnership with people and the private sector. And the rate of change is very high, very fast. It is accelerating. One can see that as well. The production of modules, the setting up of these plants, the spread of these schemes which you have pointed out, the decentralized schemes. If one can see this kind of multiplier effect coming up, so that we are starting from a very low base, but very soon we will have saturated these opportunities and have created a demand or a pattern of demand which is different to other countries but suits our country. And in that mix, there will be coal, there will be nuclear, there will be gas, and there will be solar and wind to the maximum potential that we can. Because as I keep repeating, we are using 1/5 the per capita extent of power that the United States and China are using. So we have a very long way to go. As we become a 10 trillion economy, the power demand is going to shoot up. There is no alternative to that because that is what is human well-being. Mr. Radhan just pointed out, you will need power to pump water for drinking water, you will need for lifts, you will need for electric transportation, you will need for air conditioning, you will need for lighting. And the manufacturing as services economy grows, electric vehicles are spreading. So whenever we look around us, we will see that we may be using more electricity than anybody else. And that is, I think, is the big game changer that is coming about in India. And the question is not about what is the source of power, but that we are moving towards electricity rather than an oil economy.
Indeed.
40% of carbon emissions today come from transportation emissions, which is basically the internal combustion engine and the oil economy prevalent in the West. We are moving away from that back to electricity. We started with electricity. The Industrial Revolution started with electricity, hydropower and electricity. And I think we are going back in that direction, in which renewable energy plays a very major part. Take
Indeed,
hydro
sir.
also.
Indeed, sir.
The
And
hydro potential that we have exploited so far is something like 10% or even less of what the potential is. Every other major country in the world has exploited that hydro to the maximum.
Indeed, sir. And to take the discussion forward, my next question is to Anil, sir, that if you look at the commitment of India for sustainable development, it is not only limited to national goals, but India is leading the world. For instance, the G20 New Delhi Leaders Declaration, which states that all members encourage efforts to triple renewable energy capacity globally. And then India is assisting 100 crores annually to the International Solar Alliance till 2025 in developing and emerging countries. So, Anil sir, when we look at India and its commitment for sustainable development, it is not only walking the talk, but also helping others and leading the world globally. How do you see India's stand and stance in this?
It's absolutely in the right direction. I have been of the considered view that equity comes first in these climate negotiations. What was the principle in Kyoto was briefly abandoned, in my view. We have different responsibilities, which my friend Mukul will, of course, he's an expert in that. We have to share that burden, taking in view our past actions. And the developed countries of the world must lift the major load of the can, of the financial can. They have to provide funding for the lesser developed countries or the developing countries. And alliances like the International Solar Alliance are a tremendous step in the right direction. I'm glad it is headed by one of the officers who was working with me in the Ministry of Power, Dr. Ajay Mathur. And alongside that, I will say that we have to work tremendously on energy efficiency and improvement, like the movement from the incandescent bulb to the LED. The power consumption must go down substantially. There are options available. We cannot have energy guzzlers in place. We've got to move in the direction of energy efficiency. Taxation of this government must encourage energy efficiency. I tried as Secretary Power that we should link the slabs of taxation to the star rating or the energy efficiency rating of a particular electrical product, so that the government sends a clear message that if you can do the same work with lesser amount of power, we would like to encourage that gadgetry or that industrial equipment or that domestic equipment. And that is why we introduced the star rating in electrical products like refrigerators, air conditioners, fans, many other, because the lesser you consume, the lesser is the financial burden, the lesser is the environmental burden. And you mentioned about the International Solar Alliance. India, being a more matured partner, has a responsibility to also show the way to other developing countries, particularly in Africa, other regions of the world, that look here, we are there to hold your hand and we are together. We have the scientific pool. We shall also try and contribute in a small way, or whatever way we can, financially, to spread this technology and adoption of this technology across the world. Because when a developed country speaks to the developing countries, they think it's a top-down approach. But when India speaks to them and says, this is the way forward, they feel that India, being a comrade in the development process, our voice carries much more weight. But we have to walk the talk. And it's not an easy walk. It's a tough journey. But as long as we declare that we want to do it that way and are transparent about it, I think we shall be able to convince a lot of other people to come on board and hold our hand and hold our voice against
Absolutely,
the developed world.
And sir, if we consider that, as we are discussing, that there is this growth in renewable energy sector, can we say that these reforms and these growth will also directly or indirectly bring more job opportunities and skill development opportunities for youngsters and people? And can we expect a boom in job creation in this sector in near future?
Yes, I think we should certainly look in that direction. The curricula in the technical institutions has to change drastically, because earlier courses in the old power mode, technology mode, they've got to change. The teachers have to change. But teachers of my generation or even earlier generation were totally unaware of these developments. But I see the change. When I go across to other cities in India, I was recently in Calcutta, and I could see the language and the body language also of the younger generation. They're certainly adopting that, and they're familiar with that technology, and some of them are growing up with the new technology. And I'm sure that this generation getting the right message and the right financial inputs. You see, finance must be easily available. When officers like Mukul and myself joined service, there used to be huge concessional lending for small and marginal farmers, which was maybe 1/4 interest rate as compared to the other lending. And that's how you were able to encourage improvement in farming practices, adoption of dairying and subsidiary occupations to improve incomes. Now, if we want this new form of energy to be adopted, I think financial institutions have to create a substantial interest dispensation for adoption of these technologies so that industry and people run to these technologies and abandon other modes of investment.
Absolutely. And as we are entering the concluding stage of our program, Mr. Mukul, how do you see what are the key priorities or area of focus that India should emphasize or accelerate on to transition to a more sustainable and renewable energy future?
You see, the Prime Minister, the Minister for Energy, the Finance Minister, the entire government, in a sense, is focused on one point, that we have to be a developed economy, a 10 trillion economy. Once you have that kind of goal, so in previous governments, we never had that kind of goal. We never had a clear target and a timetable. We never had that. We would say we will grow from X percentage to the Y%, but now we have a clear target and a timetable. And when you have that, then you start working backwards and realize that the kind of energy you need, the kind of employment you need, and how it will be got about, and the kind of overall development that you need. You cannot leave aside any pocket of the country. It has the development, the energy needs have to spread. Once you take that kind of view, you automatically realize that near the coal mines, you can have pithead power plants. Far away, you need some other solution. What are the other solutions? Then you start, and this is what is happening today in this government, and not only here, but also in the international sphere. Earlier, we used to say we will not do anything for climate change unless you give us the money. Now, in the G20 and even in the conference going on at the moment, India is saying, this is what I can do. You want me to do more? Then you help me. And what I can do is a substantial amount. People can see it happening. Now, this is a big change, that it is not just that we aim to do this, we are actually doing it. And once you start actually doing it, problems come up, you deal with them, and then you solve them and you spread more. In conclusion, one can say that this all of society, all of government, all of the nation approach that has been set up in the field of energy, particularly renewable energy, is showing a lot of success. And in the future, if we have this discussion after a couple of years, you will find that the scope has changed. The amount of renewable energy that is spreading in the country will have increased manyfold, and that is the real success.
Indeed, on that note, with your insightful inputs, we conclude the program. Thank you so much, Mr. Rajdan and Mr. Sanwal, for joining us today on Akashvani.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on boosting renewable energy adoption towards India's sustainable development. The participants were Anil Rajdan, energy expert, Mukul Sanwal, environmentalist, and Omvesh Upadhyay, anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 9289094044.